girls. Make sure your vibrator and your taser are different colors.
All right. I'm well aware that what you just saw has absolutely nothing to do with the theme of this video, but I thought I'd just lighten up the mood a bit because what I'm about to explain here in this video affects billions of people and it's induced by the very few. And the key of this video is to let you know that that which is used to the detriment of many by a few is also accessible to you. The credit of these footages go to Internet Archive at archive.gov. Now, let me open the door to origin of something called offshore banking and how world economics are affected by it. In doing so, you should think of how your own economics are to interrelate to similar format, because this format is how it originated and still exists today. When British colonial powers began seeing uprising with foreign countries, it was not only known by those other countries they colonized, but it was well known by the British power system holders themselves that something new was required to create a continuous flow of control over the rest of the world. Enter finance. Finance was a tool, but for this to be done, the flow of the T-ledger, incoming and outgoing, debit and credit, must not be on the same grid as the national GDP or the government's bookkeeping, which is always posed as being publicly available for audit, discussion, and observation. This is where offshore banking came in. The reason offshore banking was done by the British Empire may be easy to guess by some, but for those who may not realize it as of now, I'll just say it here. It was and is necessary for any colonial powers to use offshore banking because the activities they were involved in was minimally, if perceived from the most docile and benign angle, said activity of these colonial powers were simply genocide. So it was necessary for them to hide how they fund these activities. When countries like the Muslim nations in quote-unquote Middle East engage in international conflict and their leaders subsequently become what is classified as war criminal, and that leader is charged accordingly, the evidence they usually use against him are the paper trails while he was in control as the head, financed the battles and the skirmishes. This is where the colonial Western groups outsmarted most other international leaders and are able to walk scot-free without being charged with war crimes, basically. They cover their paper trail. Only recently have these other countries begun catching up. Now, if such a body politic like British Empire, which the United States is its kingdom, if they realize the importance of paper trail, then maybe, just maybe, you should learn a little bit about it also. The amusing part is the system of offshore banking is based on the principle of personhood, where an entity can legally be classified as a person of its own, actually available to the general public, but of course with the strict conditions of what I call the 2 C's, competence and capital. When you hear any news outlets or historical analysis or some foreign government personnel speak of the injustice of how their central bank, which of course we know is unified because of who controls it. But whenever you hear these foreign countries complain that their central banks are bankrupt by the US dollar and how the US has made the world reserve currency, or how these countries are in debt to the US or say France or Germany, the well-known cousins and brothers and blood relatives of what is now referred to as colonial powers. 90% of all those loans that are provided internationally, meaning between national bodies of government, 90% of these types of loans come from private and offshore banking created by these nation states, and never from the direct bookkeeping of their immediate body politic. All these takes place in a very small city called the City of London. Till today, as we speak, this moment as you listen to this, when you hear people provide you the analogy that London Bridge has fallen, this is them attempting to point to where all the source of the world problem in modern time is being controlled financially. City of London is a financial district and nothing more. Far more of a financial district than Washington, D.C. people speak about. Far more than a city of New York or Manhattan or Delaware. Once more, recall that United Kingdom is an empire, and the aforementioned cities are but small subsidiaries of it. So it makes sense that the City of London is the main router to all the other networks that are financially influential in the ebbs and flow of the world economy, which in turn affects the daily lives, feelings, activities, thoughts, and perception of the everyday man, woman, and child. The City of London is ran by representatives of an entity called the City of London Corporation. When you watch that movie John Wick, the order that continuously send liaisons to control the members of that hotel and the organization is the City of London. That's the order that sends some people there to say it's time to execute this man or this woman, and everyone starts shaking in their boots. The City of London is a separate entity from the rest of actual London. The City of London, again, the city, not the entirety of London, but the City of London. No different than how City of New York is different from New York State. The same applies with the delineated difference and separation from the City of London and London. The city called City of London existed prior to 1066, when a Moor called William the Conqueror, who is now depicted as allegedly a pale anthropomorphic man, waged war into the city which already existed. And about a year later, according to the recent preserved accounts, he struck a deal to control the city as one of his holds. By the way, William the Conqueror was a Norman, like the place Normandy. The same City of London we are speaking of, where the modern, I repeat, the modern foreign exchange market, Forex, really began to boom when the sterling currency was declining and the value of it was placed in juxtaposition with the US dollar, which was forced into creation. Aside from the private currencies used by each banks or mining or coal companies, where they would issue their own inside currency for their workers to only use inside their own stores and things like that to keep things in house. Besides those private currencies, when the Forex market in juxtaposition to the USD began occurring, this was that thing called the US dollar really became prevalent. The result of this was a boom in power of the sterling currency compared to any other currency at that time. All this was motivated and influenced by the small 1 square mile location called the City of London, which is another word of financial stronghold. That 1 square mile area called the City of London has the most banking than any other place in the world. Yep. By now, you know that banking and bank are two separate things, as explained in the Infinite Banking series of videos. Banks are the brick and mortar. Banking is the activity, the act of moving, creating, and using monies and every other format of contract involved to allow that to come to life. Part of that is the offshore system, where former military posts of the British Empire were used as banking centers, where no other reach of law can see, hear, or know what is going on with their private banking affairs. The well-known one is Switzerland, where they basically are just stone walls against any other entity attempting to see what you have going on with your banking at that jurisdiction. But then there is a slippery mechanism called trust, which I'm certain at this point you've heard of, which allows anyone to play with the concept of ownership. Due to the slippery slope of ownership, it becomes hard to tax anyone using it. What makes it more slippery is that in any British offshore jurisdiction, anyone can set up a trust and act as a trustee. There are no registry that trust has to be set up or that discloses that a trust has been set up. There are no certification requirements that a trust is set up. I want to repeat that again. Within these offshore places, there are no registry or legislature that requires that a trust has been set up, and there is no requirement of certification of the same. Now, in the 50 states, we still see certain states acknowledging that, okay, certain types of trust can exist, and they provide means of acknowledging that it can exist through things like certification of trust, aka abstract of trust, in place of showing your declaration or any other important trust minutes. But there are other jurisdictions that doesn't even care at all for any of that in order for you to actually function with a trust. That's why I call it a slippery slope. Only the trust parties know of its existence because there's no requirement of accounting, aka an invisible arrangement. A little after the use of trust in the old British outpost, the United States joined this mechanism by establishing an offshore system in the Caribbean. If you ever wonder what these adjoining islands are, and all these Caribbean islands with funny names you've never really heard of or never even imagined it was there, well, that's what they do there, in case you didn't know. And the way the United States began theirs is through something called errors and omission. I'm certain you've also heard of that term. Errors and omission is a term you usually would hear in insurance. But do you know the real meaning of that phrase, errors and omission? We don't account for outflows and income of monies that can be classified as criminal activity. That's the meaning of errors and omission. The lack of accounting for outflow and inflow of any type of financial activity that just might be classified as criminal. This is also partly why errors and omission is embedded into insurance policy to alleviate criminal liabilities that might have occurred or been performed by employees of any given municipalities or any type of entity, by paying out the one who was damaged. But the primary reason for errors and omission is used with trust and insurance since the inception of that concept around the 1960s is to add the monies made by private mercenaries and cartels into the books of the government. Now, when I say cartel, I'm not saying it in a spiteful way to compare some type of body politic with what you usually hear with Mexican cartel and stuff like that. I'm actually speaking about cartels, actual gangs. These body politics are partners with them. And one of the ways they move money is through these offshore accounts. But the way they do it is through a private books. And the way the private bookkeeping can only exist is if they use trust and offshore banking. And the way the private bookkeeping can only exist is if they use trust. And the way the private bookkeeping can only exist is if they use trust and offshore banking. What they do is they subsequently add it into tax havens to use as loans for colonized countries who will then default on those loans and have their land taken as collateral, which will subsequently affect who controls their economy and the worth of the currency of the one controlling the colonized country's economy. Do you see? Do you see how the game is played on a governmental level by using offshore private banking? While it is in fact sinister, this principle can be used in a non-criminal, non-sinister manner, but to benefit your own offsprings, your successors, and your sign. The same mechanism is available for people to use, the everyday man and woman. This should ring a bell in your mind regarding the beneficial owner report, BS, where they claim, oh, it is for the purpose of stopping money laundering. Well, the same people engaging in money laundering are the ones telling you to expose your butthole into the cold by violating principles of trust to show your beneficiaries because you're sharecropping a business with the state of so-and-so. They are doing that good old thing that a narcissist or a bully will do when they know they are wrong or about to be exposed. An old trick of creating the problem and stepping in voluntarily to create a false solution so long as you are not in the spotlight of being the one at fault, even though you knew you were at fault. So the necessity to hedge and preempt the blame and disclosure of your dirty laundry becomes a necessity. After all, most people will never know that they can use trust, but without the legal means. So the people must be conditioned to assume at all times that their beneficiaries are subject to being disclosed. But the key is that beneficial reporting BS with the Corporate Transparency Act is that it's a stepping stone. Only LLC, S Corps, and C Corps beneficiaries are disclosed through it, right? See, the plan is then to create a legislature against the everyday man and woman to prevent them from anonymity, and prudent administration by remaining private and keeping their monies private, which you have the right to. These same offshore monies by countries are used to invest in real estate and other market portfolios that use high frequency computing to gamble. See how they revolve that same money through offshore and private banking? See, some of the steps, not all of it, but about 60% of the steps you will take to create your own private banking. And actually, how to utilize the connection with other people from other countries and properly secure your own financing, so long as you're not engaging in any criminal activity. Again, I emphasize, so long as you are not engaging in any criminal activity, as explained in the 101 privatization course. If you have not joined the waiting list, I invite you to do so. The more regular people have this power in their hands, the better. The thing is, those using this type of function are using it based on principles of right and obligation of contract, which I believe is in Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Federal Constitution. This is basically what these governmental bodies are doing. Now, keep in mind, the one that they adopted the Constitution from had hold of these adjoining islands in the past, but there was a transfer of power. So all this is going on while the daily man and woman is left being monitored by their TV, rising cost of milk, and even worse, the use of an obsolete system in the hopes of pursuit of happiness. The system the average man and woman are given is designed to expire about a generation, every 25 years at best. The system that the very few use is so solid that it has been used for millennia, but called something else in modern times. It will continue to not only survive, but also thrive. I think the least you deserve is to have access to that also. The link is in the description of this video.